Go ahead.
The mountain of trash seemed to stretch very far, then gradually, without perceptible demarcation of boundary, it became something else. But what? A jumbled and pathless collection of structures, cardboard cartons, plywood, and rotting boards. The rustling and glassless shells of cars had been thrown together to form habitation. Michael Thelwell, 1980. It is obvious that urbanization is happening at a rapid rate worldwide. For example, this is Sao Paulo in 1911 with a population of 250,000, and then today with a population of 19 million. Around the world, 180,000 people move to cities each day, and by 2050, 2/3 of the world's population will be living in cities. There is little or no planning to accommodate these people and provide them with jobs, homes, food, water, or sanitation facilities. This results in the formation of slums. The classical definition of a slum is overcrowding, poor or informal housing, inadequate access to safe water and sanitation, and insecurity of tenure. For example, an estimation of 57% of urban Africans lack access to basic sanitation. In cities like Nairobi, the poor rely on flying toilets, which is defecation into a plastic bag. Currently, 1/3 of the world's urban population lives in slums, which is approximately 1 billion people. By 2030, it is estimated that 2 billion people will live in slums. I think it's important to take some time and let these numbers sink in. As we sit here in class, 1 billion people call decaying, dirty, and inadequate spaces like this their home. And in just 2 decades from now, this number will double to 2 billion. So why do people move to the cities if what awaits them are dirty, overcrowded slums? Davis argues that global forces are pushing people out of the countryside. These forces include increased droughts throughout Africa, food imports in places like Mexico and Kenya, civil wars, and a competition of industrial-scale agribusiness, which puts small-scale farmers out of work because they can't compete with large-scale farmers. So why are global forces pushing 180,000 people out of the countryside and into cities every day? Specifically, Davis points a finger at IMF's Structural Adjustment Program, called SAP, that was mandated in the mid-1980s. SAP is a package of economic reforms based on liberal and neoliberal economic theories that lead to things like drastic reductions of state involvement in national economy, mass privatization, and reduced public spending, especially on social programs. Davis argues that the SAP's decentralized model of development is reflective of Washington's dominant international perspective on development instead of what developing countries actually need. Because of this, SAPS has failed miserably in cities around the world, resulting in drastic cutbacks in urban public services, steep declines in wages, the disappearance of the middle class in Africa and Latin America, increases in crime, deterioration of public transit and sanitation facilities, and destabilized rural economies. In this chapter titled A Surplus Humanity, Davis discusses the informal sector that emerges as a result of SAPS. The informal sector consists of a surplus population of people without formal jobs, who are forced into unskilled, unprotected, and low-wage informal service jobs, such as taxi drivers, food stalls, scavengers, drugs, and prostitution. Usually these jobs do not generate sufficient income and take place in unsafe work environments. Informal workers make up about 2/5 of the economically active population in the developing world. It is impossible to imagine that this failed development policy, which has forced over 1 billion people into the informal sector, could find a way to reintegrate them. In this way, we need to look for new solutions when talking about world development policy. I experienced this need for new solutions when living in the slums in northeastern Thailand this past fall. We called this village here the landfill community. The first thing you notice when you walk into the landfill community is, of course, the landfill. 50 acres of glistening, oozing, ripe garbage. The next few things you see are houses lining the landfill, and kids playing around the trash incinerator like it was a toy fort. The last thing, if you look closely, are people speckled throughout the landfill, crouched down, picking through trash. The people in the landfill are scavengers. meaning they search through other people's garbage for plastic objects to sell as recyclables. 30 years ago, a few of the city's scavengers followed the garbage trucks to the landfill and ended up settling there on the public land. Why spend your day searching the city for trash if you can live next to 50 acres of it? Because the people in this community don't own the land they live on, they don't have access to city water, electricity from the grid, national health care, or many other resources the normal Thai citizens have access to. They barely make enough money to survive and often eat food found in the landfill. During my stay here, I helped my homestay family out with the work. For a few weeks I spent with them, we searched through heaps of rotten fruit, plastic bags, old clothes, diapers, appliances, toys, and dead animals, just to find plastic and glass bottles. A day's work per person usually turns out to be 110 baht, which is just over $3 a day. As I was wading through the city's excretions, it was unreal to consider that that was their home, that this is what they did every single day, and this is what their kids would do. So with thousands of people moving towards the cities in the world every day, many countries will need to reconsider its policy towards urban development and work towards ensuring the rights of its urban populations. In 40 years, over 6 billion people will be living in cities. So for better or the worse, the city is the future, and the question remains, what kind of city will it be? And these are my questions. The first one is, the concept of rights to the city alludes to the notion that the city's spatial entities that exist because of collective efforts. No city that I've ever been to has been constructed by one set of hands or uniform input capital. This situation brings to mind the question of which residents have the right to the city and what that right entails. Do only rich residents deserve proper urban services, security, and convenient access? So basically, like, my situation that I experienced with the landfill community, whereas all the wealthier Thai citizens, and even the middle class, if they had a job and they owned a house, they had access to the electricity grid, which was cheap energy. They had city water that was sanitary, and Thailand has a national healthcare system, and so they had access to very, very cheap healthcare. Because these people neither had land nor jobs that were in the formal sector, they didn't have access to any of these resources. And so what defines sort of the right to the city? Like, is that their right to have all those things? Like, should the city provide those things for, like, the poor of the poor? Like, what is appropriate? Yeah.
I don't think anyone would disagree with the fact that like poor people do deserve all these things. But I think what often happens is that they're just forgotten most of the time because the slums are usually in a part of the city that people avoid.